Joining me now is Sky News contributor Beau Davidson. Beau, thank you for joining me on the show. The White House says this is a common condition. What more do we know about it?
Yeah, it is pretty common. That's my understanding of it. Trump is 79 years old. It's called chronic venous insufficiency, which is when the circulation in the blood to the legs doesn't act properly. However, it's not a bad condition. It doesn't mean thrombosis. It doesn't mean that there's some sort of condition that affects the heart or the arterial veins and the things of that sort that are going to the brain and the heart. So it's a common condition, and it is treatable. And I think you saw Caroline Leavitt deliver that level of transparency from the podium, which is a lot more than I can say for the predecessor, Joe Biden, someone whose mental and physical condition were always in doubt, always in question. And I do have to question those doctors that treated Joe Biden. And I'd like for them to be subpoenaed to know, are those doctors, were they coerced to lie about Joe Biden's health? This kind of transparency that we're seeing from Caroline Leavitt and from Donald Trump, I think is amazing. It's what Americans want. We want to know what his health is like. We didn't get that in the past administration. So kudos to Caroline Leavitt for nipping this in the bud, addressing the situation, letting us know the president is in basically perfect health. He just had a couple of swollen ankles, and that means varicose veins. Not a big deal.
Oh, look, absolutely. Better to be transparent, unlike the previous administration. Now, Beau, Elon Musk has mocked Donald Trump's claim that files relating to the federal investigation into Jeffrey Epstein are a hoax. He's taken to X to say, wow, amazing that Epstein killed himself and Ghislaine is in a federal prison for a hoax. Now, this is, of course, in response to Trump's attempts to deflect questions about the Epstein files by casting doubt on the authenticity of the documents. But, Beau, just today, Trump says he's asked Attorney General Pam Bondi to produce any and all pertinent grand jury testimony. So what does all this mean?
Well, Danica, I was at the Turning Point USA Student Action Summit last weekend in Tampa, Florida. This is where a lot of young people, Gen Z people, come to learn from the issues of the day. And from Megyn Kelly to Tucker Carlson, this was the talk of the conference. People were not willing to let this go. And I think for good reason. And the reason is the following, is that Donald Trump promised transparency. We just talked about it with his medical condition, right? Deliver the truth to the American people. If you've teased something like Pam Bondi has, we've got thousands of hours of child porn, we've got these ledgers, and then you don't deliver them, it makes you look non-transparent. Hillary Clinton deleted thousands and thousands of emails. You can't just delete this problem away. And so I believe when you look at the MAGA base, those who have supported Donald Trump, they want this same level of transparency, and they deserve it. Because if Pam Bondi said both in private and in public, there are thousands of hours of tapes, there's got to be a way of protecting the victims' identities while also saying, okay, are there clients in there? And then how about his accountant? How about his personal lawyer? Why are victims having to sue in civil court for information that we need? So I think Trump is right to nip this thing in the bud, as we just said, and make Pam Bondi release the unsealed grand jury testimony, because we deserve that. And let the American people make their minds up. If there's nothing there, let us see it. But don't tease us with something and not deliver on it. I think Pam Bondi and Donald Trump have a responsibility to everyone, to the American people, to deliver this information.
Well, I've got to say, even here in Australia, we want to know what's in those files, so hopefully it's all released. Now, you mentioned Joe Biden's health earlier. The House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer says that former Vice President Kamala Harris and former First Lady Jill Biden should be subpoenaed in the panel's investigation into former President Joe Biden's mental capacity while in office. But, suffice to say, Americans deserve the truth about who knew what about Biden's mental capacity.
They do. They deserve the truth about Epstein. They deserve the truth about JFK. They deserve the truth about Trump's health. And they deserve the truth about Joe Biden's health. And here's the problem. When you look at subpoenas with Jill Biden and Kamala Harris, that should happen. Comer is onto something here. I think he's absolutely right to do it, because the great Dr. Jill Biden, okay, she's not a medical doctor. We'll put that aside for a second, but she is a doctor. They made a point to tell us that time and time again. She knew about her husband's mental health. I almost hold Jill Biden more accountable for this than anybody else, because she knew it. But she was so greedy, so power hungry to keep her husband in power. She said nothing. She did nothing. And the same is true of Kamala Harris. Surely she knew about this. Surely she knew she was slipping, but she was the heir apparent, right? If Joe Biden became the president again, it likely would have fallen to Kamala Harris, because he might have resigned at some point, and Kamala Harris would have been the first female president of the United States. So you see, both women here in these positions were so greedy for power that they said and they did nothing. I want those doctors subpoenaed of Joe Biden's. I want Jill subpoenaed, and I want Kamala subpoenaed. And I believe truly that the conspiracy to keep Biden afloat, to keep this information under wraps, is vile and is twisted and is sick as the effort to keep Donald Trump from staying in office or getting a second term. I believe it's honestly that bad. And the auto pen as well. Don't forget the auto pen. I believe that's equally bad.
Absolutely. There is no doubt they all knew and even corroborated this big cover-up. Beau Davidson, good to see you. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure as always.